Welcome to another deep dive. We're tackling Luke 22:19 to 20 today. The institution of communion. And I'm sure you already know the passage pretty well.
Oh, yeah. It's pretty familiar territory.
So instead of rehashing the basics, what do you say we look at some unique ways pastors are using this passage? Sermons, illustrations, maybe even a few surprises along the way.
Sounds good to me. I always enjoy seeing how different preachers bring these well-known verses to life.
Right. So we've gathered sermons from all sorts of denominations, each with their own spin on things.
Excellent. I'm ready when you are.
Okay, well, one that really hit me was understanding the depth of communion, a sacred invitation from Canvas Church.
Okay. I'm familiar with them, what they have to say.
Well, the pastor uses this analogy of communion as Jesus' last will and testament. And it kind of got me thinking, like, what's our inheritance here? What's Jesus leaving us with?
Ooh, that's an interesting way to look at it. It's not just about the ritual, right? It's about the weight of that moment. What's being passed down to us, to the disciples, to the church, what treasures, what promises.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then he tells this funny story about this couple. They always have pot roast when they have guests over. And years later, their kids are like, why pot roast? And the parents suddenly realize they have no idea. It's just what they've always done.
I love that. It's like we can get so caught up in tradition, we forget the meaning behind it. Makes you think, are we just going through the motions with communion, or are we really understanding what it's all about?
Exactly. And I think that's a challenge for us as pastors, right? To help our congregations engage with it on a deeper level.
100%. Okay, so we've got the last will and testament analogy and a pot roast for thought. What else did this sermon have going on?
Well, in a totally different vein, he also talks about meeting this guy on the subway.
Okay. Seems random. How'd that come up?
He just struck up a conversation,
Yeah.
and they found out they both loved hunting.
Huh. Okay, so nothing to do with communion, really.
No, but I think that's what's so brilliant about it. It shows how even something as simple as a shared hobby can create this instant bond between two complete strangers.
I see where you're going with this. It's about connection, right? That feeling of belonging, even with someone you've never met before.
Exactly. And that's kind of a reflection of communion, right? We're united with each other, but also with Christ. We're all part of this bigger story. It transcends all those boundaries we build up.
Makes you think about all those divisions in the church. Like, maybe we need to spend less time arguing about theology and more time sharing a meal and a good hunting story.
Maybe so. All right, ready for another sermon?
Hit me with it.
All right, this one is called Embracing Faith, the Power of Baptism and Communion from Sonic Baptist Church. And it draws this really cool parallel between Passover and communion.
With Passover and communion. I like where this is going.
Right, it's not just a new ritual, it's like a whole new exodus.
Not out of Egypt this time, but out of something even bigger. Out of sin, out of spiritual slavery. Wow, that's powerful.
And just like the Israelites were told to remember their deliverance from Egypt, we're called to remember what Christ did for us through communion.
It's that act of remembering that keeps us grounded, keeps us from drifting away from the truth.
Exactly. Communion is like this regular reset button, a chance to renew our commitment to remember what matters.
It's a good reminder for all of us, you know. Life gets busy, it's easy to lose sight of what's important. We need that regular recentering. Okay, what else have we got?
Let's talk about this sermon, Transforming Hearts, Embracing the New Covenant. This is from Discipleship, Etc. with Josh Hunt. This one goes deep into the idea of the new covenant. Like, it's not just about outward stuff, it's about inner transformation.
Right, it's not just about following a bunch of rules, it's about something deeper, a change of heart.
And the pastor actually points out the Greek word kainos for new.
Kainos, yeah. It signifies a radical change, a complete departure from the old way of doing things. This isn't just an upgrade, it's a brand new start.
And he even quotes Tim Keller in this one.
Oh, nice. What'd Tim have to say?
About how we need to move away from just doing the right things and get to a place where our faith is rooted in love, joy, peace.
It's about a transformation from the inside out, and that's a message that really resonates with me. As pastors, we need to help people experience that shift, you know, from rule following to genuine heartfelt faith.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to participating in God's redemptive love through Christ. This was from Church Anywhere, and they focus on Jesus as the fulfillment of the Passover Lamb.
I always find those connections between the Old and New Testaments fascinating. You know, how Jesus fulfills the prophecies and traditions of the past. It's not about throwing out the old, but about seeing it through a new lens.
Right, and the pastor uses the word mysterian to describe communion.
Mysterian. Ah, that gets at the mystery, the awe, the things we can't fully grasp with our human minds. It's beyond just a symbolic act.
And that's the challenge, right? To help our congregations move past a symbolic understanding and really embrace the depth of grace that communion represents.
It's not easy, but that's why we're doing this deep dive, right? To explore these different perspectives and see what resonates.
Exactly. And hopefully come away with some new insights to share with our congregations.
It's amazing, isn't it, even with a passage like Luke 22:19-20, that we think we know so well, there's still so much to unpack.
Oh, absolutely. It's easy to assume we've heard it all. Then you stumble across a sermon with a fresh perspective, and suddenly it's like, whoa, there's a whole other layer to this.
I know, right? It's like these pastors are giving us a new set of lenses to look through, helping us see those familiar words in a whole new light.
And speaking of new light, I want to circle back to that sermon from church, Anywhere. Participating in God's redemptive love through Christ.
Yeah, what about it?
Well, the pastor paints this really powerful picture. A father and son out hiking.
Oh, I remember that one. The son's standing on the edge of a cliff about to jump, and the father's down below, arms outstretched, ready to catch him.
It's such a powerful image, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like that feeling of complete trust, knowing that no matter what, your dad's got you.
And that's the kind of trust we're called to have in God, that leap of faith, knowing he's always there to catch us, to hold us, to protect us.
It makes communion more than just a ritual. It's an act of surrender, saying, okay, God, I trust you, even when I don't get it.
I like that. A surrender to grace. And it ties in nicely with another theme that keeps popping up in these sermons, the idea of communion as a meal.
Oh, yeah, it's not just about the bread and the wine themselves, right? It's
Yeah.
about the shared experience, the gathering, the fellowship.
Like those meals we see throughout Scripture, they're always significant.
Big moments.
Celebrate.
Reconciliation. Like, think about the prodigal son. That huge feast the father throws to welcome him home.
Or Jesus eating with tax collectors and sinners, breaking down barriers, showing radical hospitality.
And communion keeps that tradition alive. It's a reminder that we're not meant to do faith alone. We're part of a community, a family, gathered around this table of grace.
And that sense of community is amplified when we consider the connection to the Old Testament.
Ooh, good point.
This isn't just some newfangled New Testament thing, right? You see echoes of it in the Passover, in the sacrifices, in the covenants.
Wow, yeah, you're right. It shows how God's plan of redemption has been unfolding all throughout history.
It's a beautiful tapestry, and communion is one of the threads that weaves it all together. But how do we communicate that to our congregations? You know, help them see those connections, understand the depth of this tradition.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
I think stories are crucial. We got to find ways to make those ancient stories come alive.
Like that pastor with his hunting buddy on the subway. Such a simple story, but it perfectly captures the power of shared experience.
Exactly. We need to be creative, connect the dots in a way that resonates with people, show how these ancient truths still speak to us today. Because at the end of the day, communion isn't just about looking back.
It's about right now and about what's to come.
It's about being transformed by God's grace and then going out and being a part of that transformation in the world.
That's beautiful.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. What stands out to you from all these sermons? What really stuck with you?
Honestly, the thing that keeps coming back to me is that word transformation. It's so easy to get caught up in the ritual and the routine of communion, but these pastors are reminding us it's about so much more than that.
Yeah, it's not just a symbolic act, right? It's a real, tangible encounter, allowing Christ's grace to work within us. And that should lead to change, real, lasting change. Not just in what we believe, but in, how we actually live our lives.
Which takes us back to that sermon on the New Covenant. It's not about rules, it's about a new heart, a new way of being.
100%.
And you know what's funny? Even the humor in these sermons kind of drives that point home.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Remember that story about the pot roast? It's hilarious, but it's also a great reminder. We can't just blindly follow traditions without understanding the why behind them.
Oh, totally. And that's a big challenge for us as pastors, right? To help our congregations move beyond just going through the motions, help them really experience the power of communion, the grace that's being offered.
It's a big task, no doubt.
Yeah.
So how do we do that? How do we bring that message of transformation to life for our congregations? Help them see past the familiar and really grasp the depth of what's going on here?
Well, I think a big part of it is vulnerability. As pastors, we got to be willing to share our own struggles, our doubts, the times when communion has really spoken to us, really changed us.
Oh, absolutely.
Because when we're authentic, it gives other people permission to be authentic too. It creates a space for real connection, real sharing. And that's a huge part of communion, right?
It is. And we can't be afraid to get creative, to shake things up a little. We can't just rely on the same old formulas and cliches. Got to think outside the box, stories, analogies, even humor, whatever it takes to capture people's attention, make them think differently.
Exactly. Like that pastor who compared communion to a last will and testament. That was brilliant.
I know, right?
Such a simple concept, but it makes you stop and think, what is Jesus actually leaving us with? What kind of legacy are we called to carry on?
Powerful stuff.
It is. And it's a question worth wrestling with every time we gather around the table. Because in the end, communion isn't just about remembering what happened in the past. It's about stepping into the future that Christ has won for us.
Letting that grace transform us.
And then going out and being part of that transformation in the world.
Well said.
I think that's a pretty good place to wrap things up, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. But I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. What new dimension of communion are you going to explore? What fresh perspective are you going to bring to your congregation? The journey doesn't end here. It's just the beginning.